What if I told you that the official data published after the second week of testing in Bahrain reveals that Lewis Hamilton is already equaling or even surpassing Charles Leclerc's race pace in consistency? While many were left with Leclerc's 1 minute and 31.992 seconds and the headlines about the fastest lap, the FIA left something much more important on the table: the actual stint averages, lap-by-lap degradation, and stability on long runs. And when you look at that data with a magnifying glass, the story changes completely. Is Ferrari facing a simple progressive adaptation of Hamilton? Or are we witnessing the beginning of an internal battle that no one expected so soon? What happened in the second week of Bahrain could redefine leadership within Ferrari before the season even really begins. And the most shocking thing is that almost no one is watching it. The second week of testing in Bahrain was the first real moment in which Ferrari stopped testing parts and started testing hierarchies. Up to that point, everything could be justified under the umbrella of the experimental program. But when the teams enter the long simulation phase, when more than 40 laps are chained with high load and comparable tires, what begins to be measured is no longer the car's potential, but the driver's ability to sustain it. And that's where the narrative quietly changed. During those days, Ferrari alternated different plans for Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. The Monegasque executed more direct programs with clear reference attempts and rounds where the objective was to mark territory. His 1 minute and 31.992 seconds was a statement of intent. The SF-25 had speed, and he knew how to extract it. But while the headlines focused on that lap, the real relevant information was hidden in the stint average tables that the FIA subsequently published. Because when long sequences are analyzed, the focus is no longer on explosiveness, but on degradation, thermal stability, and ERS management lap after lap. Hamilton, unlike Leclerc, did not have a continuous clean program. His days were fragmented by technical incidents and adjustments. This, paradoxically, forced him to squeeze in shorter filming windows in variable conditions. And here appears the first element that set off the internal alarms. In those incomplete windows, Hamilton's average did not fall. There were no exaggerated peaks, but there were no abrupt plunges either. The rhythm was linear, constant, methodical. That consistency in Bahrain, where the asphalt brutally punishes the rear axle, and where graining can appear in just 5 laps, is no coincidence. The Sakhir circuit requires a delicate balance between slow start traction and hard braking stability. If the driver overheats the rear tire in the first few laps of the stint, he pays the price in the final third. The sector data showed that Hamilton, even in simulated traffic conditions, maintained a minimum delta between the start and end of its runs. That means I was understanding the optimal SF-25 window faster than anticipated. And this is key. We are not just talking about speed, we are talking about structural adaptation to a completely new car for him. Meanwhile, Leclerc continued to be the reference to a return. But at long pace, small oscillations appeared when I needed to cool tires and clean air. Nothing dramatic, but enough for the comparative analysis to show that the difference was not as wide as the best time suggested. And in a team that has historically suffered from strategic management and degradation, that difference is pure gold. In addition, there is another technical nuance that begins to paint the full picture. Hamilton had already shown in Australia that he was willing to modify his style, moving towards a higher minimum corner speed approach, releasing the accelerator earlier and relying more on the progressive braking phase. In Bahrain, that process began to look more natural. Its curve entry was cleaner, reducing micro-corrections that generate extra temperature in the rear axle. And when you reduce micro-slips, you reduce cumulative degradation. It's a fine detail, almost invisible on television, but devastatingly important in data analysis. The FIA did not publish secret telemetry, but it did publish enough summaries for teams to make their own extrapolations. And when Ferrari crosses those numbers internally, the reading stops being media and becomes strategic. If Hamilton is already matching a sustained pace in the second week of testing, without a perfect program, and without a car completely adapted to his preferences, the margin for projected growth is significant. And that inevitably impacts the internal dynamics. Bahrain did not define who is number one, but he did make it clear that the distance is not structural. Leclerc does not have an unquestionable advantage in race pace. And when the championship advances to circuits with high degradation, such as Saudi Arabia or Miami, where thermal management once again takes center stage, that equality can become pressure. Because it is one thing for the data to show equality in long rhythm. And what this causes within a team that has just built its project around a driver who for years was the absolute reference is quite another. Bahrain's second week didn't generate explosive headlines at the time, but when the FIA published the comparative run summaries, the engineers don't look at emotions, they look at averages, degradation, sectoral consistency, and energy stability. And that's where the awkward conversation began. Ferrari knew that Leclerc was fast. His 1 minute and 31.992 seconds confirmed it. But deep analysis of the stint revealed something more strategic. Hamilton didn't need the perfect lap to be competitive. While Charles was exploiting specific windows of performance, Lewis was building sustainable pace. And in modern Formula One, where degradation and thermal management are decisive, sustainability outweighs explosiveness. In the comparable long simulation, that 51-lap round where McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes showed real cards, the context was key. McLaren won by 12 seconds with Norris, but Ferrari was the immediate reference. However, when the differences by compounds and phases of the stint are adjusted, the behavior of the SF26 with Hamilton showed a more progressive wear curve. There was no abrupt drop in the last third of the stint. There were no overheating peaks. That indicates something very specific technical. I was understanding the car's charge transfer under high fuel. And this is where the story gets trickier. Hamilton did not have a clean test. It suffered interruptions, technical problems, errors in classification simulations, and constant adjustments. Still, their performance windows were not fragmented in the final average. That means that even when the program wasn't ideal, the foundation was there. And when a driver can sustain pace without perfect conditions, the projected ceiling is higher than it seems. For Leclerc, the context is different. He knows the environment, he knows the team, he knows the Ferrari philosophy. Its advantage had to be structural. But in Bahrain, that advantage was not large in race pace. And that, internally, changes the conversation. Because if the difference is not technical but marginal, then leadership is no longer assured by default. Furthermore, there is an element that amplifies tension: energy management. The summaries showed that Hamilton was using the hybrid system extremely efficiently, maintaining stability even in changing track conditions. That's no coincidence. It is accumulated experience. It's career reading. It is accelerated adaptation. And when that kind of strength appears so early in the project, the internal message is clear. You're not here to learn for a year. You're here to compete now. And that is what truly leaves Leclerc in an awkward position. Not because it has been surpassed, not because it has lost speed, but because the advantage that should be clear is not. And in a championship that appears tight, where McLaren shows internal confidence and Mercedes begins to consolidate, Ferrari cannot afford hierarchical doubts in the middle of the season. Because after the second week of testing in Bahrain, Ferrari no longer only has a competitive car. You have a strategic dilemma. And when the FIA publishes data that shows real equality in race pace between its two drivers, the issue stops being technical and becomes internal politics. Until now, the structure was clear. Leclerc was the project, the natural leader, the driver molded over years to lead the new era. Hamilton arrived as an experienced champion, as an accelerator of the process. But Bahrain has altered that narrative. Not with statements, not with public gestures, but with something much more forceful: measurable consistency in long runs under real conditions. And here appears the most dangerous implication. If Ferrari confirms that in sustained pace there is no clear difference, then season management changes radically. Because in a championship where McLaren has shown internal confidence and where Mercedes also ran solid simulations, Ferrari cannot afford to divide resources without judgment. If both drivers are at the same career level since the preseason, any early strategic decision can define the title. And the key is what Bahrain left between the lines. Hamilton still does not have the car adapted to his style 100%. His program was fragmented. His days had interruptions. And yet, the averages were competitive. That projects a clear upward curve. While Leclerc, already fully integrated into the SF26 philosophy, showed his base performance. Ferrari entered Bahrain looking to validate its car. He came out with something more complex, an internal battle that could decide his season. Because when the FIA publishes cold, objective data that shows equality in race pace, the message is clear. There is no long adaptation time. There is no margin of comfort. There is real competition. From now on, and if Hamilton is already equaling long pace in the second week of testing, the real question is not whether he can fight for internal leadership. The second week of testing in Bahrain did not leave a spectacular image for social networks. There were no inflammatory statements. There were no open controversies. But he left something much more decisive: evidence. If Hamilton already matches the race pace with a fragmented program, And without a car completely adapted to his preferences, the projection is clear. The room for growth exists. And when a driver with his experience finds room for growth, the competitive ceiling rises dangerously. Ferrari leaves Bahrain with potential, but he also comes out with a question that he won't be able to avoid throughout the season. Who will really be the leader when they are both at 100%? The second week of testing did not provide definitive answers, but he did make it clear that this story will not be linear. It won't be comfortable, and it won't be predictable, because when two talents of the caliber of Leclerc and Hamilton share a car capable of fighting for championships, the battle does not begin in the first race.